Hey everybody, welcome to a Fusion 360 tutorial by Design30. This will be the first of many different tutorials that will be focusing on Fusion 360, which is a tool that I use for almost all of my product design. As a mechanical engineer, it has all the features that I need to do my product design, to do renders, to create sheet metal parts, to create machine parts, all sorts of different things. It's very powerful, and I also think it's very affordable. So I'm going to be spending some time going through all of these different features and capabilities offered by Fusion 360. But to start, I just want to give a brief overview of the user interface to help familiarize you if you're new to Fusion 360. So let's dive into that. So here you can see essentially a few numbered locations where I've called out some of these important areas for you to be familiar with as you're starting to use Fusion 360. And this is important because when you're watching other tutorials, or maybe you're reading on Fusion 360's Autodesk website, you're going to need to know what a lot of these terms mean and what they're referring to. So it's going to be really good to familiarize yourself with what is going on in this user interface. So starting here with the data panel, this is where your files are going to be stored. You can have folder structures, you're going to have your assemblies and part files, things like that. This is very similar to your file explorer if you're using a PC, something that we're all very familiar with for the most part. So it's pretty intuitive, very similar to a general file explorer. And number 2 over here, this is the applications bar. And here you have your different tabs for if you have multiple parts open or multiple assemblies, things of that nature. You will also have your save button, your undo, redo. You'll be able to access your user profile, things of that nature. If you need to save, again, which I mentioned earlier, you need to save, or if you need to create a new part, things like that, you can use this drop down right here. And then below that is your toolbar. And this is where you're gonna need to really familiarize yourself. And we will be going into a lot of detail of these different tools available within Fusion 360. But for now, you just need to know this is the toolbar. You have different workspaces that you can adjust here, which we will go into a little bit more detail once I open up the actual application and start showing you how to interact with some of these different features. So you have your workspace here that you can choose. You have different tabs, which are full of logically grouped tools that you will use to design your parts. So if you're working on a solid model or a surfacing, or potentially making a new sheet metal part, things along those lines. Over here towards the left side is your browser. Here is where you're going to have all of your different parts. In this example, it is showing an assembly. So you have all the different parts within your assembly. You'll notice here this chain link symbol. What this means is that part has actually been created outside of this file, which is something if you're coming from maybe SolidWorks or some other 3D CAD softwares, this might be a little bit different. But you can actually create multiple components within one file. That's not necessarily an assembly file. Or you can import other parts you've already designed, and then they'll reference that other part. So when you see this chain link, that means it's referencing another part that wasn't actually designed in this environment or this part file or assembly file. And we'll don't pay too much attention to that right now. We'll dive into that in a little bit more detail in upcoming tutorials. Number 5, this is just obviously your assembly, and then this white space that is floating in is called the canvas. Number 6 is your view cube. So this is just how you switch between different views. Obviously, it's just a quick way to see the front, right, top. You can click on it, drag it around, things like that. Number 7 is your marking menu. This is actually really handy. You can pull it up just by right-clicking, and these are just frequently used tools, things like that, for you to have quick access to. Number 8 is your navigation bar. This is a way to change views. You can hide and show things like joints, change from whether you wanted to pan around with your mouse or orbit, things like that. And then finally, you have your timeline at the bottom. This is, as the name infers, is a timeline of the creation of your part. So you're going to have everything from the initial component creation to your sketches and then extrusions, fillets, mirrors. These are all tools that we will dive into in a lot of detail in future tutorials. But what you need to know for now is that this is your timeline, just kind of lays out how you designed or developed that part. So that gives you a pretty good overview of what's going on with the user interface. So let's actually dive into the tool itself. So I'm going to minimize this, move this over here, and now you can see the actual Fusion 360 software. So here you can see it's a new file, just an untitled new file. We're in the design workspace. You have all of these different tools. You can switch between these different tabs to go to your surfacing tools, your sheet metal tools, things like that. Just all logically grouped together, really easy to access and to understand where to go to find different tools that you need depending on what you're working on. Over here, you can see we're currently in the design workspace, but there's a lot of different workspaces: a generative design, rendering, animation, simulations. So all these different workspaces, even manufacturing, create your drawings, a lot of really powerful tools that Fusion 360 offers. And so I want to dive into an actual part here, and this will help show some of the other features of the user interface that I was talking about. So here we have just your general screw. Here you can see you can orbit, zoom in and out. These are all settings that you can change and make them similar to whatever you're used to. If you're coming from a SolidWorks background, there's a setting that I'll show you in a future tutorial of how to set up your system like it's SolidWorks so it can feel really intuitive if that's what you're coming from. And then you can see right here in this view cube, I can grab or click on that and just pull it around, or I can click specific surfaces to move this around. I can use these arrows to move the part around, things like that. Down here, as I mentioned, you have your different display settings. So you have your visual style. If you want to change it to shaded, shaded with, what was that called? Shaded with visible edges only. If you want to do a wireframe, if that's something that is helpful for you, a lot of different options in here for just what you want the visuals to look like, what you're used to, or just, some things are more helpful than others. So play around with those. You can change your object visibility, some other things, whether or not you want to look like a dark sky. It's kind of an interesting, cool background. Maybe depending on what you're designing, this could be useful. But yeah, I like to keep these essentially with the defaults. That's what feels best for me in my workspace, but obviously you can choose to do whatever you like there. Real quick, I also want to show you how easy it is to switch to rendering. So sometimes you have to use completely different softwares for rendering, depending on what you're doing. This, it's not quite as powerful as something like Keyshot, but it's built into the tool itself, and you can do some pretty good renders very quickly, depending on what computer you're using. I have done this even on my old 2015 MacBook Pro, and it definitely struggles a little bit, but it still gets the job done. So it's really impressive, a really flexible CAD software. And yeah, like I mentioned, you can use it on PC or on a Mac, which is, for me, that was a huge selling point. I use a MacBook I've used one for the last 9 years. And this having the ability to run on that was really useful and a huge selling point for me. So overall, that is the user interface for Fusion 360. I hope this has been a good introduction, just give you a brief idea of what's going on in this user interface, what it looks like, what are some of the names that you can use. And actually, real quick, before I end this tutorial, I wanted to point you towards the website from Autodesk, which is, as you can see up here, or you can see in the top left corner of the Fusion 360. Let me switch you back to that real quick. Here we go. You can see right here, this is an Autodesk product. And so a good way to learn more about it, obviously, is to go to Autodesk's website. So let me pull this up. They also have a little tour of the user interface, and I will link this in the notes below this video. So you can go look at this. But yeah, it's just, you can see where I got the image for the initial tour. They go through all their descriptions. They also have a lot more detailed descriptions of what is going on in these different tools that you can use. So there's a ton of information. I'd highly recommend that you go to this website and check it out. There's a ton of information that will be really useful, help get you up to speed with all the terminology, things like that. So that's a brief overview of the user interface for Fusion 360. As I mentioned, I'm going to be doing a lot more of these tutorials and going really in depth on some of the tools and showing some examples of some cool products that you can design. So I hope you've enjoyed this. If you find it helpful, please subscribe to Design30 on YouTube. If it's something you think could be helpful to your friends or coworkers, please share it. I always appreciate that, and make sure to like it if it's a video that you've enjoyed watching. So that's it for now. Please come back soon for more Design30 tutorials. But as always, I want to sign off with this tagline that I've used for some of my podcasts and all the writing I do, and that's to remind people to design more and despair less. Thanks for watching.